What up everyone, this is your host JOLSID, and today I'm going to be interviewing Steve Tendon. Steve Tendon played a key role in Malta Blockchain Regulations, and if you guys are aware, Malta Blockchain Regulations were one of the first ones in the world. So he literally helped put blockchain regulations on the map. So in this conversation, we'll be talking about blockchain regulations, we'll be talking about the future of blockchain, decentralized autonomous organizations, and a lot of cool stuff, AI, IoT. So I would say get your notepad and tune into it, because I think it's going to be a lot of good information.
Well, actually, the drafting of the strategy as such was very fast, and I would say that came primarily from my management consulting experience. So I just applied to the context of the country things that I was already doing for companies. But then the hard part came, and that was how was this going to go forward in forms of processes to create the laws and the regulations, the frameworks. The first hurdle was to create a so-called cabinet memo, which is a document that the Ministry of Cabinet uses to bring up issues and make decisions. It's a formal document, so it had to be written according to lawyer language, and I'm not a lawyer. So I was presented to one gentleman who is Dr. Max Ganado, and within 5 minutes he was as enthusiastic as I was about this project, and he came on board. So together we wrote this very important document. It then came to the approval of the cabinet in the beginning of 2016, and it was approved unanimously. There were no objections whatsoever. So that's already hinted at that this whole process was going to be very fast compared to what normally regulations take in terms of timeframes and durations. The project then went over to a newly appointed minister, Honorable Sylvia Skembri, who was in charge of this new Ministry for Financial Services, Digital Economy and Innovation. The initial focus of this ministry was on the blockchain project. So a task force was set up, and I was the strategy lead of this task force. And basically the task force had the mandate to transform the strategy, let's say the theory, into practice. And in a matter of, 1 year, 1.5 years, we actually got to the point, together with Dr. Ganado and his team, with many other players in the industry. We had many consultation processes. We spoke to the central bank, to Malta enterprises, anyone who could be involved, and especially, of course, the regulators, in particular the Malta Financial Services Authority. Well, all these opinions came together, and eventually the drafts of the laws were presented. This was all fast forwarded, and at the summer of 2018, these laws were approved, and they came into effect in November 2018. So basically, in 1.5 years, we went from conception to actual deployment of these laws. So you must keep in mind that this project started in 2016.
16, yes.
So it was before the explosion of 2017 when the Bitcoin took a rocket,
yes.
basically, right? So the whole decision-making process was the initial decision-making process was unaffected by that bull race of the Bitcoin, and most of the economic valuation was based not on the cryptocurrency part, but on the prospect of blockchain. Remember my background, I was looking at blockchain as a technology that would enable new efficiencies, new business models that the blockchain would bring to the island. And the key economic figure came from a study from the World Economic Forum, where it was deemed that in a matter of 5 to 6 years, the amounts of money circulating on blockchains would be 10% of global GDP. So we just said, if that's true for the whole world, probably it's even more true for a little country that will focus on it. But we took that as a reference, 10% of GDP. And that is also significant because Malta already had an experience in iGaming. iGaming is more or less 10% of GDP. And iGaming was also an economic sector that did not exist. It was created through legislation. So Malta was not new to this idea of issuing laws that by regulating the unregulated would create new economic opportunities and prosperities. But again, the focus was on the blockchain, on decentralized computation, rather than on the Bitcoin and decentralized storage of value. Well, there are many fronts which are open right now. The effort with the Maltese law is not over. I mean, the official assignment of the task force ended the moment the 3 laws were presented, but there was a 4th law which was proposed and which is in the working now, and it came directly out of a blog post. I can give you the links that you might put in the notes. A blog post where I, having this focus on blockchain technologies and all the new forms of software entities that can be created to blockchains, I made a case for giving legal personality to DAOs. And the 4th law, which is being worked on right now, goes in that direction. It has enormous implications in terms of private law and many other aspects where, of course, all lawyers will have their saying. But I'm still involved in giving my opinion on that development. And this same law, of course, has further implications, not only regarding the blockchain, but also new developments in AI or IoT. In fact, you might want to notice that the 3rd law, which is already approved, is called the Innovative Technology Arrangements and Services Act. So we don't talk about the blockchain, we talk about technology arrangements. The blockchain is one possible technology arrangement, but AI could be another one, IoT could be another one, and who knows what the future will bring as well. Notice also that the wording is innovative, so there is a lot of focus in these laws on being able to promote innovation. That's the primary purpose of these laws. We know from other countries that regulations are often a hindrance to innovation, and we had the specific objective to do the opposite, to create laws that allow the evolution and the innovation of what we do with our technology. So that's one thing that keeps me very busy. Then always related to this topic of blockchain cryptocurrencies, I also have another extremely ambitious project going on, and that is advising the Republic of the Marshall Islands in creating their new SOV, the SOV. The idea is to create a cryptocurrency which has legal tender status. So it's not a central bank digital currency, which is something that has been hypothesized by many central banks. It has been studied by the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund. But it's a central bank digital currency is still like a conventional currency, only that it has a digital form. While on the Marshall Islands, the idea is to create a real cryptocurrency that exists on a distributed open blockchain, and yet has all the features that are needed to create a legal tender. This would have enormous consequences because Marshall Islands is effectively a state with a seat at the United Nations, so legal tender necessarily needs to be recognized by the other states, and therefore the SOC would be traded on foreign exchanges. And being at the same time legal tender and cryptocurrency, that would build like a natural bridge between any fiat through foreign exchanges and any crypto through the crypto exchanges. It's very ambitious, and we have many hurdles to confront. You asked about my own projects. I have two pet projects besides these professional ones, and one is I'm writing a book, the Book of Blockchain Strategies, of course, what else, where I'm delving into all possible ways that you can think about business strategies in relation to the blockchain, and also, of course, what to take into consideration when it comes into the field of regulations, and where should you put your company when you start a blockchain company. And the other thing I'm very happy about and keen about is this initiative, which I call the My Blockchain Island Club. It's a club of friends which bring together people who share an interest, and the interest is about the business of blockchain. Now, it's called the Blockchain Island, but it does not relate to Malta as an island, as you might probably assume. The island is the island of crypto, the island of blockchain, because we see that crypto today is an island. It's not connected to the real economy. There's still a lot to do to connect it to the real economy. So we need to build these bridges between the cryptosphere and the real world. And I think that the best way to do that is to develop real business. That's why the focus of this club of friends is about real business. So I bring together anyone who has that interest. It could be an investor, it could be a startup, it could be a service provider, it could be a software engineer, anyone who does business with blockchain. And of course globally, because the island is in the cryptosphere. And that's what I would like everyone to understand and come on board. Of course, everyone is invited to come on board. Of course, I have a crystal ball, and I can tell you exactly what happens in the future. No, of course, it's all speculative and maybe even wishful thinking. But I base my considerations on knowing how technology develops. And we all know that technology has the famous S adoption curve. Yes, and in terms of blockchain, we haven't seen even the first little tick. So this is something that will explode, and no doubt it will be compounded with other technologies like AI and IoT. Blockchain, we know, has certain features that are, at least from a conceptual level, very important both for the development of AI and IoT. I just mentioned the case of all these smart things that will be around us. They will need to be identified. So we have the identity of things. I sometimes say it's the ID of IoT, but it spells out to idiot, so I don't think that's a good acronym. But anyway, the identity of things is going to be huge. And because these things will also be autonomous, they will be roaming around us and possibly crossing borders, jurisdictional borders, organizational borders. We all know that today these borders are also data silos. They are borders between different databases. Just look at healthcare, with all the records spread across a gazillion systems, and you, as a patient, you don't have access to your own data. So in this case, where we have these autonomous entities roaming around and we want to be able to identify them, we need some sort of global identity management system, whether that is identity of individuals, and that makes also a natural connection to global problems of, as I was saying, the identity of things means that the blockchain infrastructure, or something similar to the blockchain infrastructure, but that has the same traits of eternal storage, immutability, uncensorability, and so on, becomes almost inevitable. We must have that, or all these amazing developments will not happen. And at the same time, we have these AI, IoT. It's an alphabet soup, but we have these new entities which become autonomous, and that's where the fourth law I mentioned before becomes very, very relevant. There are a number of reasons why we should be seriously thinking about the consequences of this autonomy. We will be in a situation where we as human beings will be interacting more and more with technological entities, whether they are AIs, DAOs, or something else. But it's not another person, and it's not another association of people like a limited liability company or so on and so forth. And we know that when there are interactions, and especially when there is software involved, sometimes things go to the blue screen of death, as we had in Windows once upon a time. But we are not that lucky as we were when we had the PCs like 10, 15 years ago, where we can just switch off the computer and reboot. You cannot reboot a blockchain. It's there and it's running all the time. And therefore, if these, say, a DAO that exists on the blockchain has certain behaviors which produce a damage, maybe they're not evident in the initial deployment, but they become evident as time goes by, some human being will be damaged. And the key question is, what level of recourse can we have? Who is liable? There are lots of debates around this issue. I know that in the US, there is a lawyer, I think her name is Angela Vark, who is strongly proposing that liability should be held by the developers. So, because they exercise a fiduciary role with respect to the users of this system. Now, many software engineers will rebel to this notion for a simple reason that, given the complexity of modern software creations, especially when open source software is involved, the dependency graph of codes and libraries and microservices and functions and you name it is an exponential explosion. So it's quite difficult to pinpoint who exactly is the responsible for some damage. So it's a practical problem that comes about. Some would claim, well, there might be a collective liability. The whole bunch is responsible. But why would you go after, say, someone who maybe is coding for a hobby on an open source project and doesn't even know how the software he wrote will be eventually used maybe 5 years down the line? It's really impossible to track these lines of responsibility, of liability. So I think that reasoning doesn't hold. But even if it did hold, even if we would accept the notion that software engineers are responsible for these new entities, these new creatures, specifically in the case of the DAO, the boat will not float. Why? Because the DAO exists on a blockchain, and a blockchain is that famous elephant that remembers forever. So these creatures will be eternal. They will exist forever. And we must contemplate the scenario that the original creators, the multiplicity of developers who have contributed to the creation of this entity, sooner or later they will die, they will naturally extinguish, but this entity will still exist. And maybe 200 years from now, it will create that damage. So we must contemplate this situation where there is a piece of software that exists and has autonomy and produces damage. But it's even more complex than that, because some might say, well, that will never happen. A software cannot have that sort of persistence. Such DAOs will never exist. In reality, the Bitcoin is the first DAO, because the Bitcoin, what did it do? It replaced the clearing and settlement houses. So literally took away jobs that people were doing before. And it's doing it so perfectly that no one has had a reason to complain about how it's working. Not only that, but because when the Bitcoin protocol is working, this very simple DAO, the Bitcoin is an extremely simple DAO, is also earning money, so to say. It's the transaction fees. Not only, but it's paying the miners to do the work. So we have a piece of software that has employees. Now, I don't think the miners consider themselves as employees of a piece of software, but effectively that is what is happening. It's a piece of software that is paying people that out of self-interest will do something that will keep this piece of software ongoing. If we take this forward into the future, well, some people say, oh, if something goes bad, we just take down the blockchain and the game is over. I don't think that will be possible, because in a few years, maybe it's decades, but it's no time in historical perspectives, when these blockchains will be transporting trillions of dollars every day, every single day, there is no way you can shut it off. The economies involved will just be too huge. If there is one misbehaving DAO, you don't want to take out all the others. You cannot do that. So we have to deal with this notion that these DAOs will exist forever and they cannot be taken down. And I said the Bitcoin is a very simple DAO because it just moves a number from one place to another, from my wallet to your wallet. But more sophisticated DAOs will have much more convoluted and complex behavior. They might even include or use the services of AI. And then you get to the point where you don't even know what they're doing, because they literally have a mind of their own. So if you have an entity that has a mind of its own and exists forever and you cannot take it down, you must contemplate the possibility that it can create damage. What do we do about that? And that is the key question of this fourth one. Well, it's even more perverse, if you wish, because we talked about the autonomy of the DAO, and it's a trait that it shares with AI. AI is autonomous, but the DAO is even more perverse. Why? Because by having an economic transaction between itself and humans, it becomes even self-sufficient. And AI is not self-sufficient. You can call Terminator and ask it to take down the Google Cloud or whatever, or the robots or the autonomous car. There is a physical point of attack. But with a DAO, it's on a blockchain. It's everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It's next to impossible to take it down. But since it's offering services and being paid for, in turn it can pay. So it's not only autonomous, but it's self-sufficient.
Self-sufficient, true.
It's getting money to keep on functioning, as long as it's providing useful services.
Yes, as long as there's a market, makers and takers are there. Yeah, you're right.
Yes.
And they're always going to be those.
You could probably starve a DAO to death.
I highly doubt.
Then you'd ask the question if it would be ethical to starve a DAO to death. Sorry.
Yeah, you probably have to have
global consensus to actually, and that's close to impossible to start one.
I think that's impossible
It's
because
impossible,
because of the gaming theory of
No.
how the Bitcoin or
Exactly.
these protocols work. Of course, you can reason about what is the consensus mechanism, is a proof of this or proof of that. But at the end, when all these things will be ruled out, and there are new protocols coming out which are very promising on the paper, like the Avalanche protocol, which looks extremely interesting. Which really can have billions of nodes which are contributing to the upkeeping of the immutable record.
Absolutely.
And once you are in that situation, it's very difficult to pull the plug. It's not like when the famous DAO hack happened, where they could reverse the tape and change the immutable record.
In future.
Probably you could reach me by signing up for my draft book, because I love also to receive feedback. And I'll give you the link afterwards, but it's chainstrategies.com/DBS4 because you can download a free chapter of the book. And notice, well, if you give me feedback before I finish writing it, I'll also give you the entire book for free.